Hello, welcome back to my channel. It's Kerry the Chemist, also known as the girl who trades. And today I'm going to be looking at some of my trades. I'm focusing on earnings and what happens after earnings. So this is an earnings season, and let's see, Tesla, and the earnings was October 18th, 2023, and that's a picture of the earnings there. So it was negative earning, negative report, down 3%. How many millions? Okay, so we look at that, and this is the date that we had our earnings. So overnight earnings was released and the stock fell. So on Thursday, when the markets open, we can see where Tesla was down. So if you look on my chart, you can see these levels where there are numbers, and this is called the pivot high and low. And it's just in my indicators. You go into indicators and you select pivot high and lows, and it shows you these highs and lows on the daily chart. Or if you move it to the weekly chart, it will also apply, show you the weekly high and the weekly low on Tesla. So if we look at Tesla right now, based on our weekly trend, we can see that this stock is going down, and that's the weekly trend on Tesla. So you can use that as a guide to say Tesla can come down to this pivot point, which is 150, 152. So going forward, for the next couple of weeks, we're expecting Tesla to come down to into the 152, 150 pivot lows. Okay, so my focus today is to look at what happens after earnings. So we see earnings was October 18th, and the following day you see where the stock gapped down. So what I do is I go in and I make my marks on the chart. I usually put these as gaps because they represent, well, dash lines to represent my gaps. And I usually have, like, if it's a red, if it's a gap down, I like it in red to indicate that sellers are in this gap. So sellers push the price down from the 240, let's say 242.5, all the way down to close at 219, 220. So days following the earnings. So let's look at what happens. So if we look at this chart up close, we see that the stock traded down, 1, 2, indecision, indecision on the third day. Then it tried to go back up, but this is acting as a strong barrier. So there are a lot of sellers that sit in this entire zone, which is a gap. So there are sellers in the gap, and want to put text, we can have sellers gap. Okay, so this is our sellers gap. So we mark it at the body of the candle, at the top of the gap, and the next body at the bottom of the gap. So that's how you would put your gap. So you see how the stock trended down, and if we look to the left, we can see where it passed this pivot point, which is one zone, like a sell zone. So it break that sell zone. So we will call that one sell zone. And then it even went further. Well, it haven't broken the next sell zone is down here, which is what we have in our weekly chart. So based on our weekly, so we see where it trended down, indicating that it can go lower because it broke this pivot point. It came here and picked up few buyers in this area, and then it went up back to the gap zone. The gap zone is a strong resistance level, so it pushed the stock back down here where there is another small gap in this section. So I'm gonna put this in there as our minor gap where the stock gapped up. So it's been trying to fill the gap. So it gapped here, try to fill in the gap at November 2nd. Still strong selling pressure here for a few days, so it kind of ranged, went in a range, and then after ranging it fell back down to this small gap, and then the buyers took control, filling the earnings gap. So it strong gap up, and then it completed the gap. So usually when after earnings, you can trade in the direction of the stock for a few days. In this case, you can see where it's sold off day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So one whole week of selling off after earnings is what we notice with in the case of Tesla. And then it took another week before it filled that gap. So this is approximately 14 days. So if we count all these candles, these are daily candles. If we count all these candles, then we would have an idea of how long it takes for it to fill that gap. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Huh. So we're almost 3 weeks when we finally fill this gap. Okay, so gaps don't fill immediately. They take weeks to months before they finally fill. So that is the point I'm trying to drive home. And we can trade in the direction of the gap for several weeks until it finally closes the gap. All right.